The basement archive of Mercer Hale Systems was a place the living had forgotten. 3 floors beneath gleaming silicon towers, past corridors that hadn't seen a cleaning crew in decades, Vivian Mercer Hale sat alone in absolute darkness. 63 years old, silver-streaked hair clinging to a tear-stained face, her designer blouse wrinkled beyond any hope of repair. In her trembling hand, she held a prescription bottle. 37 pills, enough to end everything. The feeble glow of her dying phone illuminated a tarnished brass plaque mounted on the concrete wall. The letters spelled out words that had once filled her with pride. Mercer Hale Systems, pioneer of American software. 1982, 4 decades of her life, building, fighting, believing. All of it reduced to this forgotten room. This final choice. She had come here to say goodbye. Not to the gleaming offices upstairs where she had commanded an empire. Not to the boardroom where she had just been betrayed by people she trusted. She had come to this hidden archive, this secret place her father had built decades ago, because it was the only space left that still felt like hers. The board meeting had ended at 5:47 p.m. 11 votes to 1. A unanimous decision to sell Mercer Hale Systems to Nexus Global Corporation. 4 decades of independence, innovation, and American technological leadership erased in a 3-hour meeting filled with spreadsheets and hollow justifications. The architect of her destruction had been the last person she ever expected. Preston Kincaid, her CFO since the company's early days. The man who had stood beside her through every crisis, every triumph, every moment of doubt. The godfather of her only son. The person she trusted more than anyone else in the world. After the vote, Preston had placed his manicured hand on her shoulder. His voice had carried the practiced warmth of a funeral director. "Ellie, it's just business. You know that. Take the weekend. Clear your head. We'll find you a position on the advisory board. Your legacy will be respected." Legacy, as if she were already dead. Vivian opened the pill bottle. The tablets scattered across the dusty floor like fallen stars, white against gray concrete. She gathered them slowly, one by one, feeling their smooth surfaces against her fingertips. Her father had built this company in a garage. She had been 15 years old, doing homework on one end of his workbench while he soldered circuit boards on the other. Edmund Mercer had believed that American innovation could change the world. He had been right. Now his daughter sat in the darkness he had left behind, holding enough medication to ensure she would never have to watch the strangers dismantle everything he had created. The phone screen dimmed, battery at 3%. Soon, even that small light would abandon her. Then she heard footsteps, heavy, measured, approaching down the corridor outside the archive room. Vivian froze, pills clutched in her palm. No one came down here. No one even knew this room existed. The archive didn't appear on any building plans. Her father had constructed it during renovations in 1989, a private workspace hidden from corporate oversight and curious employees. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. "Ma'am? Anyone in there?" The voice belonged to a man, deep, roughened by age, but steady in a way that suggested military discipline. The flashlight swept across the room, found her huddled against the wall, found the pill bottle, found the scattered tablets on the dusty floor. He understood immediately, but he didn't run, didn't reach for a radio to call security, didn't look at her with the pitying horror she would have expected from someone discovering the Queen of Software in her lowest moment. Instead, he stepped inside the archive room, closed the door behind him, and lowered himself to the concrete floor across from her. "I'm Declan," he said simply. "Declan Vasquez. I've worked maintenance here for 15 years. Never met you face to face, but I've seen you in the halls. Always moving fast. Always carrying the weight of something." Vivian stared at him through the darkness. Her dying phone cast just enough light to reveal his features. Late 50s, silver hair cut military short, a lined face that spoke of hardship endured and survived. He wore a gray maintenance uniform with the company logo stitched above the pocket, a maintenance worker, finding the CEO on the floor of a forgotten basement, surrounded by sleeping pills. "Why aren't you calling someone?" Her voice came out hoarse, cracked from hours of silent crying. "Security? An ambulance? Would that help?" The question hung in the dusty air between them. Vivian thought about it. Really thought. An ambulance would mean a hospital, a psychiatric hold, news cameras outside the building by morning, headlines about the Mercer Hale CEO suffering a mental breakdown while her company was sold out from under her. Preston would love that. It would make everything so much easier for him. "No," she admitted finally. "It wouldn't help." Declan nodded slowly. He reached into the pocket of his uniform and pulled out a phone, not to make a call, but to show her a photograph on the screen. A little girl stared back at her, dark eyes far too serious for her age. A worn stuffed triceratops clutched against her chest. The photo had been taken in a hospital room, judging by the equipment visible in the background. "My daughter Wren, she's 8 now, was 5 when this picture was taken." Declan's voice remained steady, but something deeper moved beneath the surface. Her mother was in that hospital bed. Cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. Vivian looked at the photograph, then at the man holding it. 3 years ago, after Elena died, I kept a bottle just like yours in my nightstand." He met her eyes directly. "Told myself it was just in case, just a backup plan for when things got too heavy to carry." The confession settled over her like a blanket. This stranger understood, not theoretically, not from reading articles about mental health awareness. He understood because he had stood at the same edge and looked down into the same abyss. "What stopped you?" Declan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. "Wren asked me to teach her to code. Said she wanted to build a robot to bring mommy back." A faint smile crossed his features. "She was 5 years old, and she had already figured out that the world runs on technology, that maybe if she learned enough, she could hack death itself." He put the phone away. "I couldn't leave her alone in a world that had already taken so much." The words struck something deep in Vivian's chest. A resonance, an echo of her own life, her own losses, her own desperate grip on reasons to keep going. "I had a son once," she heard herself say. "Daniel. He died in a car accident when he was 22. His godfather gave the eulogy." Declan was quiet for a moment. Preston Kincaid was his godfather. "Yes." The word came out like broken glass. "He held my hand at the funeral, told me Daniel would have wanted me to keep building, keep fighting. And I believed him." Her laugh was bitter, hollow. "I trusted the man who eulogized my son to protect my father's legacy. Instead, he's been planning to destroy it for longer than Daniel was alive." "Why?" "I don't know." The admission felt like tearing open a wound. "I don't understand any of it. We were friends for decades. He helped me through my divorce, and now he's selling Mercer Hale to a soulless conglomerate that will strip it for parts." Declan was quiet, absorbing this. Then he said something that changed everything. "Before I was a maintenance man, I was a software engineer." Vivian blinked. "IBM in the 1980s. Worked on the team that developed parts of Deus." He shrugged as if this revelation were no more significant than mentioning a previous address. "After that, spent 20 years at various firms until the 2008 crash wiped out my career along with my pension. Maintenance work is steady. Lets me be there for Wren." "You helped build DOS," Vivian repeated, struggling to reconcile this information with the man in the gray uniform. "Small part of a big machine, but yes." Pride flickered briefly across his features. "Your father and I actually crossed paths once. Back in '93, Edmund Mercer was looking for someone to help refine some encryption algorithms. Off the books, outside normal corporate channels. Vivian went very still. I consulted on Project Condor. Project Condor was the encryption system that had built Mercer Hale's reputation, the foundation of everything the company had achieved, the technology that had put them on the map, secured government contracts, established them as pioneers in data security. You worked with my father on Condor? The mathematical implementation. The theoretical framework was all Edmund. I just helped translate it into functional code. Declan's eyes held hers. He paid me privately. No official record. I was bound by non-compete clauses at my other job, and he didn't want the board asking questions about outside consultants. Why are you telling me this now? Because your father mentioned something else during those late-night coding sessions. A project he was developing in secret, something bigger than Condor, something that would be his greatest work. Vivian's heart began to pound. He called it Phoenix. The name hit her like a physical blow. Her father had mentioned Phoenix exactly once, near the end of his life. He had been feverish, confused, rambling about unfinished business and hidden files. She had assumed it was the dementia talking. Phoenix was real? According to Edmund, it was going to revolutionize security. Not just digital, physical, supply chains, authentication, tracking. He said it would be decades ahead of anything else in the market. Declan paused. But he died before completing it, and I never knew what happened to the files. Vivian looked around the archive room with new eyes. This space contained her father's private collection. Documents, prototypes, correspondence that chronicled the authentic history of American computing. If Phoenix existed, if those files had survived, they would be here, hidden in the same room where she had come to end her life. Help me look, she said. It wasn't a request. It wasn't quite a command. It was something in between, a lifeline thrown across the darkness between two people who understood loss. Declan nodded once. Then he rose to his feet and extended his hand. She took it. His palm was calloused, work-worn, steady, the hand of a man who had built things, who had fixed things, who had kept going when everything in him wanted to stop. They searched the archive together, using Declan's industrial flashlight to examine shelves lined with storage boxes and filing cabinets with fading labels. It was Declan who found the seam. There's something here, he said, running his fingers along the back wall. Feel this, a gap in the concrete. Vivian pressed her palm against the spot he indicated. Cold stone, rough beneath her skin. But there was a slight depression, a line that shouldn't exist in what appeared to be solid wall. She pushed. A section of wall swung inward, revealing another chamber beyond. My God, Vivian breathed. I never knew this existed. Your father showed you the main archive? Declan asked. When I was 16, he told me it was his private sanctuary, the place where he kept the real history of Mercer Hale. But he never mentioned another room, never even hinted that there was more. She touched the edge of the hidden doorway, feeling the precision of its construction. He must have built this later, after I took over the company, after he realized he couldn't trust anyone with what he was really working on, not even his own daughter. The hidden room was small. A single metal desk dominated the center. Ancient computer equipment covered in dust cloths lined the walls. The air smelled of dust and old paper, but beneath that, faint but unmistakable, the ghost of piped tobacco, her father's private sanctum. Preserved like a time capsule from the mid-1990s. Notebooks filled with Edmund Mercer's cramped handwriting sat stacked on the desk. Technical diagrams covered the walls. Faded photographs showed young engineers in short-sleeved shirts, celebrating milestones that had faded from corporate memory. And hidden behind a framed photograph of the original Mercer Hale team, concealed inside the backing, Declan found a USB drive. The label read, Phoenix, Final Iteration. He never destroyed it, Vivian whispered. He hid it here, waiting. For what? For whom? She looked at Declan, this maintenance man who had helped build the foundation of modern computing, this widower who understood the weight of grief, this stranger who had found her at her darkest moment and chosen to stay. I need to know what's on this drive, and I think I need your help to understand it. Declan glanced at his watch. The numbers glowed in the darkness. Nearly 1 in the morning. Saturday had already begun. I have my daughter this weekend, but Ren is unusual. A complicated expression crossed his face. Pride mixed with concern, mixed with something like wonder. She's 8 years old and reads college-level programming manuals for fun. If Phoenix is what Edmund described, she might actually be able to help. You want to bring your 8-year-old to decrypt my father's secret project? I want to introduce you to the smartest person I know. His expression softened. Besides, she's been asking why I work nights in a building I can't talk about. Maybe it's time she saw what her father used to be. Vivian thought about the pills still scattered across the floor of the outer archive. She thought about the board meeting that had shattered her world. She thought about Preston Kincaid and his decades of friendship that had ended in betrayal. Then she thought about a little girl who wanted to build a robot to bring her mother back. There's a diner around the corner, she said. Open all night. We can talk more there. Declan nodded. He didn't ask about the pills. Didn't suggest she pick them up. Didn't mention calling anyone or checking her into anywhere. He simply walked beside her as they left the archive room, climbed the service stairs, and emerged into the Boston night. The city lights reflected off the harbor in the distance. The same view Vivian saw from her penthouse apartment, the same constellation of human ambition that had always reminded her why her work mattered. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond the pills in her purse. Phoenix was waiting, and so was a little girl named Ren. Saturday morning arrived with the crystalline clarity that sometimes follows sleepless nights. Vivian had barely closed her eyes. Her mind raced with possibilities, with questions, with a strange turn of fate that had brought a maintenance worker into her life at precisely the moment she had been ready to leave it. At 10 o'clock sharp, her doorbell rang. She opened the door to find Declan standing in the hallway of her Beacon Hill penthouse, dressed in clean jeans and a pressed button-down shirt. Beside him stood a small figure that immediately commanded attention. Ren Vasquez was 8 years old, but her eyes belonged to someone much older. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, a serious expression that seemed permanently etched onto delicate features. She clutched a Python programming manual thick enough to serve as a doorstop, and she studied Vivian with the unnerving focus of a scientist examining a specimen. "You're Miss Vivian," Ren announced. "Dad says you're sad because bad people want to take your company. He also says you were going to do something permanent last night before he found you." Ren. The warning in Declan's voice was gentle but firm. "It's okay." Vivian knelt to the girl's level, meeting those knowing eyes directly. "Your father is right. I was in a very dark place. Mom was in a dark place before she died, but it was cancer, not sadness." Ren considered this distinction with academic detachment. Sadness is harder because you can choose to stop it. Cancer just happens. The simple profundity of the statement nearly broke Vivian's composure. "That's very wise, Ren. I'm good at seeing things other people miss." The girl walked past her into the apartment without waiting for an invitation, immediately gravitating toward the dining table where Vivian had set up her laptop with the Phoenix Drive. "Is this the secret project? Can I see?" For the next hour, Vivian and Declan watched in astonishment as an 8-year-old dissected 4 decades of encrypted innovation with the methodical precision of a surgeon. Phoenix was extraordinary. The project represented a revolutionary approach to supply chain security, applying advanced encryption principles to physical objects rather than just digital data, tracking, authentication, protection, a system that could verify the integrity of goods through complex global networks, preventing counterfeiting, detecting tampering, ensuring authenticity at every stage of the journey. It was decades ahead of its time, but it was also incomplete. There's a gap here, Wren said, pointing to a section of complex mathematics. The algorithm wants to do something, but it doesn't know how to talk to real-world systems. She paused, searching for words that adults might understand. Like someone who speaks perfect French trying to order food in Japan, the language is beautiful, but nobody understands. Can you fix it? Vivian asked, hardly daring to hope. Wren tilted her head, considering the question with the gravity it deserved. Maybe. I need to think about it. Can I have some paper? And a snack? Thinking makes me hungry. While Wren worked, covering page after page with equations and diagrams that seemed to flow directly from her brain to her hand, she spoke without looking up. Dad keeps all of Mom's things in a box under his bed. He thinks I don't know, but I do. He looks at them when he's sad. Declan went very still. Keeping sad things isn't wrong, Wren continued, her pencil never stopping. It just means the love is still there. Looking for somewhere to go. Vivian felt tears prick at her eyes. This child who had lost her mother at 5, who processed the world through mathematics and code, understood something about grief that most adults spent lifetimes failing to grasp. You're extraordinary, Wren. I know. Mom said my brain works like a computer. She meant it as a compliment. The pencil paused briefly. I miss her, but I have Dad. And now maybe we have you too. The words settled into the room like morning light. That afternoon, they entered Mercer Hale Systems through the service entrance. Declan's maintenance credentials granted them invisible passage, just as they had for 15 years. The hidden archive revealed more secrets. Edmund Mercer had been meticulous, paranoid even. His private sanctum contained not just the Phoenix files, but correspondence that chronicled years of secret development. Notes that referenced problems he had been trying to solve. Diagrams that showed the evolution of his thinking. And references to a betrayal that had shaped everything. Roland Kincaid, Vivian read aloud from a letter dated 1981. My former partner has filed suit claiming ownership of work we developed together at MIT. Declan looked up from the filing cabinet he was searching. Kincaid? Preston's father. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. He and my father were colleagues before Mercer Hale existed. There was a legal battle. My father won, but she trailed off, reading further. The documents painted a picture of bitter rivalry. Roland Kincaid had claimed that Edmund Mercer stole his ideas, his research, his rightful place in computing history. The lawsuit had been brutal. Edmund had prevailed, but Roland Kincaid had been destroyed in the process. Reputation ruined. Career ended. Life shattered. Preston's father died believing my father was a thief, Vivian whispered. And Preston spent decades positioning himself to destroy everything Edmund Mercer built. The scope of the betrayal took her breath away. Not corporate opportunism, not simple greed. This was revenge that had been cultivated across generations, nurtured in secret, executed with patience, that bordered on obsessive. Using Vivian's CEO access, they began examining Preston's communications. Email archives, internal memos. Correspondence that should have been routine. What they found was devastating. Operation Legacy Wipe, Declan read aloud. His line features grim. Phase 3 complete. Board confidence in VMH at a historic low. Nexus Global prepared to proceed with acquisition. Upon closing, initiate systematic deconstruction of Mercer brand identity. Target, complete erasure within 18 months. Preston hadn't just sold her company. He was planning to erase every trace of its existence. Strip the patents, dissolve the brand, scatter the employees, ensure that Edmund Mercer's name would fade from technological history, just as Roland Kincaid's name had faded decades before. 3 years, Vivian said, her voice hollow. He's been planning this for 3 years. Every decision, every strategic recommendation, every vote of confidence that wasn't, all of it designed to bring us to this moment. Wren looked up from her equations. Dad, I figured out the gap. Her voice was matter of fact, as if she hadn't just solved a problem that had defeated her grandfather. The algorithm needs a bridge between theoretical encryption and physical verification. I can show you how to build it. Kids don't know what's impossible, Wren said when asked how she had done it, so we try everything. They worked through Saturday night and into Sunday morning. Mercer Hale's R&D laboratory on the 14th floor became their headquarters. State-of-the-art equipment surrounded them, resources that Declan had only dreamed of during his years in the industry. I forgot what this felt like, he admitted, running his fingers over a workstation that cost more than his annual salary. Being on the building side instead of the maintenance side. By dawn on Sunday, they had a working prototype. Phoenix lived again. The system successfully tracked test objects through a simulated supply chain, detecting tampering attempts, verifying authenticity, maintaining an unbreakable chain of custody. It was crude, unpolished, a fraction of what Edmund Mercer had envisioned. But it worked. This is incredible, Vivian breathed, watching the demonstration unfold on multiple screens. My father saw problems that the industry is only beginning to recognize now. Supply chain security, authentication at scale. This could be worth billions. The question is whether it's enough, Declan said. The board meeting is tomorrow afternoon. Preston's deal is already done on paper. Even with Phoenix, changing their minds won't be easy. Vivian's phone buzzed. A text from Preston Kincaid. Ellie, dinner tonight? The Wellington 7 p.m.? I'm worried about you. Let me explain everything. She stared at the words. A lifetime of friendship condensed into 2 lines of false concern. He wants to make sure I don't find something before tomorrow, she said. Then let him think he's succeeding. Declan's expression hardened. Go to dinner. Play along. Let him believe his plan is still on track. While we prepare a surprise he'll never see coming? Something like that. He paused, then added, I made a call this morning. Senator Broderick Callahan. We served together in Kuwait. He chairs the Commerce Committee's Technology Oversight Panel now. He's very interested in the national security implications of Nexus Global acquiring proprietary American technology. Vivian stared at him. You got a United States senator to crash my board meeting? I saved his life in 1991. He owed me one. The Wellington restaurant gleamed with old money elegance that Sunday evening. Preston Kincaid sat across from Vivian, every silver hair in place, every word carefully calculated. He had dressed impeccably, as always, the same sophisticated presence that had charmed clients and colleagues for decades. You've been busy this weekend, he observed, watching her over the rim of his wineglass. Working on something? Just going through old files, reminiscing. Vivian matched his casual tone. Did you know my father kept a private archive in the basement? Hidden room. I never knew it existed until this weekend. A flicker in his eyes, just for a moment. Edmund always was secretive about certain things. Yes, he was. She set down her glass with deliberate care. Tell me, Preston, did your father ever mention a project called Phoenix? The change in Preston was immediate and visceral. His hand froze halfway to his wineglass. The practiced warmth drained from his face, replaced by something cold and calculating. For just a moment, the mask slipped entirely, and Vivian saw the man beneath. Not her trusted friend of decades, but a predator who had just realized his prey was not as helpless as he had believed. Where did you hear that name? His voice was sharp now, all pretense of casual concern abandoned. Just something I found in my father's notes. Phoenix was destroyed. The words came out too quickly, too forcefully. Edmund burned those files before he died. There's nothing left of that project. Vivian felt her heart rate spike. He hadn't asked what Phoenix was. He hadn't expressed confusion or curiosity. He had immediately claimed it was destroyed. Preston Kincaid had known about Phoenix all along, and he had spent years ensuring it would never see the light of day. Probably nothing important, she said, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Just an old man's unfinished ideas. But they both knew she was lying, and they both knew the game had changed. Preston studied her for a long moment. Then the mask returned, that warm, avuncular smile she had trusted for so long. Ellie, whatever you're planning won't work. The contracts are signed. The board has voted. Nexus Global takes ownership Tuesday morning. He leaned forward with practiced sincerity. I'm trying to give you a graceful exit. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Vivian met his gaze without flinching. Thank you for dinner, Preston. I'll see you tomorrow at the board meeting. She left him sitting at the table, feeling his eyes on her back as she walked away. Calculating, suspicious, but not suspicious enough. Monday afternoon, 2 o'clock. The Mercer Hale Systems boardroom occupied the northwest corner of the executive floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Boston Harbor, the same view Edmund Mercer had admired when he designed this space decades ago. Preston Kincaid sat at the head of the table, Vivian's traditional position, the seat she had occupied through thousands of meetings, negotiations, crises, and triumphs, now claimed by the man who had spent a lifetime plotting her destruction. 11 board members surrounded the mahogany table, men and women she had worked with for years, people who had voted unanimously to sell her company without meeting her eyes. Representatives from Nexus Global watched via a video conference, faceless executives waiting to collect their prize. The door opened. Vivian entered first. She wore a deep blue dress that her father had always loved, accented by her mother's pearl necklace. Not the power suit of a corporate warrior, but the dignified elegance of a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was fighting for. Behind her came Declan Vasquez, not in his maintenance uniform, but in an immaculately pressed suit that transformed him from invisible worker to distinguished professional. The face that had seen combat and loss and quiet triumph now carried the confidence of a man returning to territory he had never truly left. Beside him walked Wren, 8 years old, flower-dressed with a pattern of small dinosaurs, her worn triceratops tucked under one arm, and that knowing gaze scanning the boardroom with the cool assessment of someone evaluating a complex system. Finally, Reed, filling the doorway with the authority of federal office, came Senator Broderick Callahan. Preston's composure shattered. Vivian! He rose from her chair, voice tight with barely controlled alarm. We weren't expecting additional guests. I've amended the agenda. Her voice carried the steel of 4 decades of corporate warfare, tempered by 48 hours of revelation and resolve. Before any vote is finalized, this board deserves to see what Mercer Hale Systems is actually capable of developing. The presentation unfolded with precision choreography. Declan introduced himself not as a maintenance worker, but as a software engineer who had collaborated with Edmund Mercer on the original Condor encryption system. His credentials were impeccable, his expertise was undeniable, and his explanation of Phoenix made even the most skeptical board members lean forward in their chairs. Phoenix represents a fundamental shift in security architecture, he explained, bringing up visualizations on the boardroom's display system. Not just protecting data, but protecting physical objects through their entire journey, supply chain integrity, authentication at scale, prevention of counterfeiting, tampering, and theft. Wren assisted with the demonstration. She had prepared test scenarios that showcased Phoenix's capabilities, attempting to hack the system with various attack vectors while the board watched in fascination. Every attempt failed. Every intrusion was detected. Every vulnerability had been anticipated and addressed. The applications are virtually limitless, Vivian continued when the demonstration concluded. Military logistics, pharmaceutical supply chains, critical infrastructure protection. Phoenix represents not just next-generation technology, but an entirely new market segment worth billions. Senator Callahan spoke up, his authoritative voice commanding immediate attention. I can confirm that the Department of Defense has identified supply chain security as a critical priority for the next decade. Technology of this nature would be of significant interest to multiple governmental agencies. The Commerce Committee would take a very dim view of such innovation being acquired by foreign-influenced entities. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Preston rose from his seat, the mask firmly back in place. This is impressive, Vivian. Truly. A weekend project assembled by a maintenance worker and his child. But it doesn't change the fundamental business reality. The contracts are signed. The vote has been cast. Nexus Global represents the best path forward for our shareholders. Does it? Vivian's voice remained calm. Or does it represent the culmination of your personal vendetta? She nodded to Wren, who activated the display with practiced ease. Preston's emails appeared on the screen, highlighted and annotated in a child's precise handwriting. Communications spanning 3 years. Strategic undermining disguised as professional advice. Deliberate sabotage packaged as market analysis. Operation Legacy Wipe. 3 years ago, Vivian said, Preston Kincaid initiated secret negotiations with Nexus Global. Not to secure the best deal for Mercer Hale, not to protect shareholder value, but to orchestrate what these communications describe as the systematic erasure of my father's legacy from American technological history. Board members reached for the printed copies that Wren now distributed with solemn efficiency. Pages rustled, faces paled. This is absurd, Preston insisted. These documents are obviously fabricated. Vivian is desperate, unstable, trying to undermine a legitimate business transaction with manufactured evidence. Authenticated by our own IT security systems, Vivian cut him off. Metadata and encryption signatures intact. Verified independently by Senator Callahan's staff this morning. Silence filled the boardroom. Preston Kincaid stood alone at the head of the table, watching decades of patient revenge unravel in real time. His cultivated composure cracked, then crumbled. And what emerged from beneath the mask was something raw and wounded and terrifyingly honest. You want to talk about legacy, Vivian? His voice carried a lifetime of suppressed rage. Let me tell you about legacy. He stepped away from the table, moving toward the windows, toward the harbor view that Edmund Mercer had loved so much. My father was brilliant, more brilliant than Edmund ever was. They were partners at MIT, equals. They built the theoretical foundations of modern encryption together, working side by side in a cramped laboratory, while the rest of the world didn't even know the digital revolution was coming. Preston turned to face the room, and his eyes held the burning conviction of a man who had carried injustice for a lifetime. But when it came time for recognition, Edmund Mercer took everything. The patents, the credit, the funding, the future. His voice cracked. My father died believing he was worthless, believing he had contributed nothing to the world, believing that his life's work had been stolen by a man who smiled to his face and stabbed him in the back. He looked directly at Vivian. Edmund Mercer killed my father, not with a gun, not with poison, but with lies and lawyers and the systematic destruction of everything Roland Kincaid had worked to achieve. His voice dropped to something almost like regret. I even stood at your son's grave. I gave the eulogy for Daniel, a boy I had watched grow up, knowing that one day I would take everything from his mother. Do you know how that felt? Holding your hand while you wept and counting the years until I could finish what I started? Vivian felt the words like physical blows. Daniel, her beautiful boy, dead at 22. And Preston had used even that grief as a part of his long game. I spent a lifetime waiting for this moment, Preston continued, positioning myself, building relationships, waiting for the perfect opportunity to ensure that the Mercer name would fade into nothing, just as the Kincaid name faded. The confession settled over the room like a toxic cloud. And I would have succeeded, Preston added, if not for a maintenance worker who should have stayed invisible and a child who should have been in school. Declan spoke for the first time since the demonstration concluded. I helped Edmund build Condor. I was his secret collaborator, working in the shadows while your father's reputation was destroyed. His features held no defensiveness, only the quiet acceptance of complicated truth. I didn't know about Roland Kincaid until this weekend. I didn't know what Edmund had done to his partner. He paused. If I had known, it wouldn't have changed what Edmund did. But I'm sorry for your father's pain. I understand what it's like to be erased from your own work, to watch others take credit while you fade into invisibility. Something shifted in Preston's expression. Not forgiveness, perhaps not even acknowledgement, but a flicker of recognition between two men who understood loss. Senator Callahan spoke into the silence. Given these revelations and the clear national security implications of the Phoenix technology, I'm advising the Commerce Committee to open a formal investigation. All international acquisition attempts involving Mercer Hail Systems will be frozen pending federal review. The vote was unanimous, 11-0. The Nexus Global deal suspended indefinitely. Preston Kincaid removed from his position pending investigation of corporate espionage and securities fraud. Security officers entered the boardroom to escort him out. Preston paused at the door, looking back at Vivian one final time. It won't bring your father back, he said. Saving his company won't undo what he did to mine. No, Vivian agreed quietly. But maybe it means the cycle ends here. Maybe it means our children don't have to carry what we carried. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he was gone, a lifetime of patient revenge unraveling with every step down the hallway. Vivian knelt down to Wren's level, where the girl stood clutching her triceratops and watching the adult drama unfold with detached curiosity. Miss Vivian, Wren's voice was small but steady. Mr. Preston's dad was hurt by your dad, and now Mr. Preston is hurt too. She looked up with that unsettling wisdom. Is that what happens when people don't forgive? The hurt just keeps going and going? Sometimes, Vivian admitted, when people hold on to pain instead of letting it go, it can poison everything. They end up hurting others the same way they were hurt. That's sad. Wren considered this. But also kind of dumb. Hurting people doesn't make the first hurt go away. It just makes more hurt. You're absolutely right. So what do we do instead? Vivian thought about her father. Brilliant, flawed, capable of both innovation and cruelty. She thought about Roland Kincaid, destroyed by a partnership gone wrong. She thought about Preston, who had wasted a lifetime on revenge when he could have built something of his own. We choose differently, she said finally. We acknowledge the hurt, but we don't pass it on. We build instead of destroy. Wren nodded with the gravity of someone much older. Like Phoenix, rising from ashes instead of making more fire. The Edmund Mercer Innovation Archive opened its doors on a crisp October afternoon. Not just a museum, a monument to truth. The main hall featured 3 displays arranged side by side. Edmund Mercer's contributions to American computing, documented with both pride and honesty, Declan Vasquez's restored legacy as a founding collaborator, his work on Condor finally acknowledged after decades of invisibility, and Roland Kincaid's early research recognized for the first time since his death. Healing requires honesty, Vivian had told the board when proposing the design, even about the parts that hurt, especially about those parts. Phoenix had transformed from weekend prototype to industry revolution. Government contracts worth hundreds of millions, private sector partnerships spanning the globe, a technology platform that would reshape supply chain security for generations to come. And at the center of it all, leading the development team as chief technology architect, stood Declan Vasquez, the maintenance worker who had never stopped being an engineer. Wren consulted on algorithm refinement under a special educational arrangement that let her continue her regular schooling while contributing to projects that would have challenged graduate students. On this October afternoon, with autumn light streaming through the archive windows, Vivian stood in her office overlooking the harbor, the same view her father had loved, the same city lights that had always reminded her why the work mattered. Declan stood beside her. "She asked me something this morning," he said. "Wren, what did she ask?" "She asked if she could call you Grandma V." He paused, letting the words settle. "I told her that was up to you." Vivian's breath caught. "Grandma V?" "She said you're too important to be just Miss Vivian anymore." He turned to face her fully. "She also asked if you were going to marry me. I told her that was complicated." "What's complicated about it?" "Well," his expression softened with something that might have been wonder. "I spent 15 years being invisible. You spent 4 decades building an empire. Our families have enough drama to fuel a television series, and I'm reasonably certain I'm in love with you, which complicates things considerably." Vivian reached up and touched his face, this face that had found her in the darkness, that had stayed when anyone else would have run, that had helped her discover what her father had hidden and what he had stolen and what they might build together from the wreckage of the past. "I'm in love with you too," she said, "and I think our story is complicated enough to be interesting." From the doorway came Wren's voice. "Are you two done being mushy? The pizza's getting cold, and I want to show Grandma V my new algorithm. It's going to revolutionize something. I haven't decided what yet." They looked at each other and laughed. Real laughter. The kind that comes from unexpected joy, from finding connection where none seemed possible, from choosing hope over despair. "Coming, kiddo," Declan called. As they walked together toward the conference room where Wren waited with pizza and algorithms, and the boundless optimism of a child who had never learned what was supposed to be impossible, Vivian thought about phoenixes. Not the mythical bird, the real thing, the choice to rise from ashes instead of making more fire, the choice to build instead of destroy, the choice to love instead of hate. Edmund Mercer had made terrible mistakes. So had Roland Kincaid. Their sons and daughters had inherited that pain, carried it forward, let it shape their lives in ways both visible and hidden. But Wren Vasquez, 8 years old, wise beyond measure, fierce in her capacity for love, had shown them another way. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still unwritten. In her purse, Vivian still carried the empty prescription bottle, not because she needed it, but because it reminded her of where she had been and how far she had come and who had found her in the darkness when she was ready to surrender. A maintenance worker, a little girl with a dinosaur, and a secret room where her father had hidden his greatest work, waiting for someone to find it, waiting for her to choose life. The archive doors opened to visitors that afternoon. Families wandered through displays chronicling the authentic history of American innovation. Children pointed at ancient computers. Parents read plaques explaining how the digital world they took for granted had been built by human hands and human minds. And in a corner of the main hall, A small display case held a simple brass plaque. It read, "In memory of those who built the future, acknowledged and forgotten alike, may we honor their contributions by choosing to rise from ashes instead of making more fire." Below it, in a child's careful handwriting, someone had added, "Keeping sad things isn't wrong. It just means the love is still there. Looking for somewhere to go." Wren's words, a gift from an 8-year-old philosopher to everyone who would ever stand in that hall and wonder about legacy, about loss, about what we owe to those who came before and those who will come after. Vivian Mercer Hale had come to a forgotten basement to end her life. She had found instead a reason to live, a partner who understood darkness, a daughter who saw light everywhere, and a phoenix rising from the ashes of 3 families, carrying them all toward a future that none of them could have imagined alone. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning.